All right, now we got our piece cut, and so now what we're gonna do is I pulled the laminate pad back so I don't have any movement. I'm gonna measure from the wall right now 5 5/16, which is the width of my board. I'm gonna make a mark there. Now what I wanna do is I wanna subtract 3/4 of an inch because that's how much I'm gonna take off my board. So I'm just gonna put my tape down here and I'm gonna come in that mark 3/4 of an inch, which is right there. Take my tape and I measure and I see that it's 4 5/8 to that mark. So now I'm going to take that mark and I'm going to transfer it down on the floor on both sides. And then I'm going to snap a chalk line. So I'm snapping my chalk line, and now I'm going to take my row that I have sitting here and I'm going to push it up against this line and line it up, the tongue right to the line. And now I'm going to take this board that I have and I cut the female end off of it. I cut the female end off of this board. This is just a scrap piece of laminate that I got off of our first cut. I cut the female off with the utility knife because it came right off, but you might need to use a table saw. I left the tongue, the male part of the tongue on. By the time I put my marker right here, with this tongue, it's 1/8 of an inch. By the time I put my marker right there to ride along it, I've got 1/4 inch. That's the gap I'm going to have along the wall. So what I do is I take my board and I just start marking it along the wall. Now I'm coming up to a vent, and this is a little bit different situation. You want to cut your vents net. And so I'm just going to make that a net cut. And I'm really going to put my marker in there so that I know I get a nice net cut. It'll be about 1/8 of an inch. But I can just line my board right up to it, and then I can take my board and go straight. I got it straight on the board here. Now I can just come straight and make my mark. So you can see there's my vent right there. Now I'll just keep following this along. And I don't need to pick it up, I can just ride the wall. Just like that. The whole way. Now I'm using a marker here, and if any of my marks are still on here, I can wash this off with an acetone. And it says that right on the instructions in my box, so I know that that's safe. So you want to make sure before you go and do something like that it's okay with your bot, or on your instructions it's okay for you to do that. And so now we'll take these pieces after I'm done marking them and we'll bring them outside and cut them, and then I'll show you how to attach our starter row. Okay, you can see so now we'll take these outside and we'll cut them. And you want to make sure that you keep this board with you the entire time. We're going to use this the entire job. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use a jigsaw, and we're going to cut these off on the jigsaw. I'm not so sure that these are perfectly straight, so I'm just going to use the jigsaw. You could use a table saw, but we're going to use a jigsaw here. So we'll just cut these out, and then we'll get them inside and start installing our next row. figure out how to. That's kind of what it's going to look like. A jigsaw is definitely a tool that you're going to want to have for a saw. Also, we use a chop saw, which is a saw that just comes down. It also does 45s. It's a miter box. And so those are the kinds of tools that you're going to need for cutting. You can get away with not having a table saw if you have a jigsaw. So for sure, this is the tool that you're going to need, is a jigsaw. So we went outside and we cut that starter row, and now what I've done is I came back in here and I did the next 2 rows, and you can see that we have 3 rows done here. And the reason why I did that is I wanted to make it solid. So what the next step is and how I do this, and this is what I find to be the best way to do it, is I actually go through this row and I'll put some drill holes in it, some pilot holes, and I'm going to screw this floor down and hold it in place so that it's nice and solid and it won't move while we're doing the installation. Now we have a 1/4 inch gap here against the wall, and I've already drilled some pilot holes, and I'm just going to show you what I did here. I just get through the laminate and a little bit through the subfloor, and I made myself a nice little pilot hole. Now the trim's going to cover here. I've got a wide trim, and then we're going to have a 1/4 round on the outside of it. Not many trims are going to cover this unless you go with a wider trim. You probably are going to have to put some sort of 1/4 round around to get that gap size that you're going to need. And to be honest with you, 1/4 round is really the way to go anyway, because it makes it look sharp. And if you're installing it yourself, I'll be honest with you, it's really very easy to install 1/4 round. You shouldn't have any issues with it at all. If you can tackle laminate, you can tackle 1/4 round. The wall that I'm using, I made sure that it was pretty straight. When we snapped our line, I went through it throughout the entire wall to see how straight it was on that line. And so now I know if I keep my floor pretty consistent by just taking my tape measure and measuring right here, and I went 15 1/4. And so I'm going to kind of go through the entire floor while I was drilling. That's what I did. And now to make sure that it stayed straight, exactly where I want it. So now if I go right inside the holes that I drilled, it's not going to go anywhere. Now I'm not trying to damage this, so I'm just putting it in so the head doesn't actually go through the floor. I'm just going to kind of stop it right at the end there. Now if you are going to use a smaller trim, when you're all done and you pull these screws back out, you can fill these with some wood filler, and it'll hide, and it'll be close enough to the trim where you won't be able to see it. This is the method I use. The other way that you could do it is you could stick wedges in here to try to hold it. And I don't do it that way because I always have the floor move on me. If your sheetrock is up off the floor and you have a gap underneath there, it's really hard to get a wedge to hold. So I've found that this is the best way to go. If you're on concrete though, obviously you can't drill holes, so you will have to find a way to shim it. So one of the benefits now I'm going to show you with screwing the floor is how solid this is. I mean, I can kick this thing and it isn't going anywhere. So this is really the key to being able to get through the process of this installation without having to worry about it moving around on you.